The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Part 10. A current of love rushed from his heart, and the boy began to pray. It was a prayer that he had never said before, because it was a prayer without words or pleas. His prayer didn't give thanks for his sheep having found new pasture. It didn't ask that the boy be able to sell more crystal, and it didn't beseech that the woman he had met continue to wait for his return. In the silence, the boy understood that the desert, the wind, and the sun were also trying to understand the signs written by the hand, and were seeking to follow their paths, and to understand what had been written on a single emerald. He saw that the omens were scattered throughout the world and in space, and that there was no reason or significance attached to their appearance. He could see that not the deserts, nor the winds, nor the sun, nor people knew why they had been created, but that the hand had a reason for all of this, and that only the hand could perform miracles, or transform the sea into a desert, or a man into the wind, because only the hand understood that it was a larger design that had moved the universe to the point at which 6 days of creation had evolved into a master work. The boy reached through to the soul of the world, and saw that it was part of the soul of God, and he saw that the soul of God was his own soul, and that he, a boy, could perform miracles. The simum blew that day as it had never blown before. For generations thereafter, the Arabs recounted the legend of a boy who had turned himself into the wind, almost destroying a military camp, in defiance of the most powerful chief in the desert. When the simum ceased to blow, everyone looked to the place where the boy had been, but he was no longer there. He was standing next to a sand-covered sentinel on the far side of the camp. The men were terrified at his sorcery, but there were 2 people who were smiling. The alchemist, because he had found his perfect disciple, and the chief, because that disciple had understood the glory of God. The following day, the general bade the boy and the alchemist farewell, and provided them with an escort party to accompany them as far as they chose. They rode for the entire day. Towards the end of the afternoon they came upon a Coptic monastery. The alchemist dismounted, and told the escorts that they could return to the camp. "From here on you'll be on your own," the alchemist said, "but you're only 3 hours from the pyramids." "Thank you," said the boy. "You've taught me the language of the world." I only invoked what you already knew." The alchemist knocked on the gate of the monastery. A monk dressed in black came to the gates. They spoke for a few minutes in a Coptic tongue, and the alchemist bade the boy to enter. "I asked him to let me use the kitchen for a while," the alchemist smiled. They went into the kitchen at the back of the monastery. The alchemist lighted the fire, and the monk brought him some lead, which the alchemist placed into an iron pan. When the lead had become liquid, the alchemist took from his bag a strange yellow egg. He scraped from it a sliver as thin as a hair, and wrapped it in wax, and added it to the pan which the lead had been melted in. The mixture took on a reddish colour, almost the colour of blood. The alchemist removed the pan from the fire and set it aside to cool. As he did so, he talked with the monk about the tribal wars. "I think they're going to last for a long time," he said to the monk. The monk was irritated. The caravans had been stopped from Giza for some time, waiting for the wars to end. "But God's will be done," the monk said. "Exactly," answered the alchemist. When the pan had cooled, the monk and the boy looked at it, dazzled. The lead had dried into the shape of the pan, but it was no longer lead, it was gold. "Will I learn to do that some day?" the boy asked. "This was my personal legend, not yours," the alchemist answered. "But I wanted to show you that it is possible." They returned to the gates of the monastery. There, the alchemist separated the disc into 4 parts. "This is for you," he said, holding one of the parts out to the monk. "It's for your generosity to the pilgrims." "But this payment goes well beyond my generosity," the monk responded. "Don't say that again. Life might be listening and give you less the next time." The alchemist then turned to the boy. "This is for you, to make up for what you'd given to the general." The boy was about to say that it was much more than he had given to the general, but he kept quiet because he'd heard what the alchemist had said to the monk. "And this is for me," said the alchemist, keeping one of the parts, "because I have to return to the desert, where there are tribal wars." He took the 4th part and handed it to the monk. "This is for the boy, if ever he needs it." "But I'm going in search of my treasure," the boy said, "and I'm very close to it now." "And I'm certain you'll find it," the alchemist said. "Then why this?" "Because you have already lost your savings twice, once to a thief and once to a general. I'm an old, suspicious Arab, and I believe in our proverbs. And there's one that says, 'Everything that happens once can never happen again, but everything that happens twice will surely happen a 3rd time.'" They mounted their horses. "I want to tell you a story about dreams," said the alchemist. The boy brought his horse closer. "In ancient Rome, at the time of the Emperor Tiberius, there lived a good man who had 2 sons. One was in the military and had been sent to the most distant regions of the empire. The other son was a poet, and the delight of all Rome with his beautiful verses. One night the father had a dream. An angel appeared to him and told him that the words of one of his sons would be learned and repeated throughout the world for all generations to come. The father woke from his dream, grateful and crying, because life was generous and had revealed to him something any father would be so proud to know. Shortly thereafter, the father died as he tried to save a child who was about to be crushed by the wheels of a chariot. Since he had lived his entire life in a manner that was correct and fair, he went directly to heaven, where he met the angel who had appeared to him in his dream. "You were always a good man," the angel said to him. "You lived your life in a loving way and died with dignity. I can now grant you any wish that you desire." "Life was good to me," the man said. "When you appeared in my dream, I felt that all my son's efforts had been rewarded, because my son's poems will be read by men for generations to come. I don't want anything for myself, but any father would be proud of the fame achieved by one whom he had cared for as a child and educated as he grew up. Sometime in the distant future, I would like to see my son's words." The angel touched the man's shoulder, and they were both projected far into the future. They were in an immense setting, surrounded by thousands of people speaking a strange language. The man wept with happiness. "I knew that my son's poems were immortal," said to the angel through his tears. "Can you please tell me which of my son's poems these people are repeating?" The angel came closer to the man, and with tenderness led him to a bench nearby where they sat down. "The verses of your son, who was the poet, were very popular in Rome," the angel said. "Everybody loved them and enjoyed them. But when the reign of Tiberius ended, his poems were forgotten. The words you're hearing now are those of your son in the military." The man looked at the angel in surprise. "Your son went to serve at a distant place and became a centurion. He was just and good. One afternoon one of his servants fell ill, and it appeared that he would die. Your son had heard of a rabbi who was able to cure illnesses, and he rode out for days and days in search of this man. Along the way, he learned that the man he was seeking was the Son of God. He met others who had been cured by him, and they instructed your son in the man's teachings. And so, despite the fact that he was a Roman centurion, he converted to their faith. Shortly thereafter, he reached the place where the man he was looking for was visiting. He told the man that one of his servants was gravely ill, and the rabbi made ready to go to his house with him. But the centurion was a man of faith, and looking into the eyes of the rabbi, he knew that he was surely in the presence of the Son of God. "And this is what your son said," the angel told the man. These are the words he said to the rabbi at that point, and they have never been forgotten. "My lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word and my servant will be healed." The alchemist said, "No matter what he does, every person on earth plays a central role in the history of the world, and normally he doesn't even know it." The boy smiled. He had never imagined that questions about life would be of such rich importance to a mere shepherd. "Goodbye," the alchemist said. "Goodbye," said the boy. The boy rode along through the desert for several hours, listening avidly to what his heart had to say. It was his heart that would tell him where his treasure was hidden. "Where your treasure is, there also will be your heart." That's what the alchemist had told him. But his heart was speaking to him of other things. With pride, it told the story of a shepherd who had left his flock to follow a dream he had had on 2 different occasions. It told him of a personal legend, and of the many men who had wandered in search of distant lands or beautiful women, confronting the people of their times with their preconceived notions. It spoke of journeys, discoveries, books, and change. As he was about to climb yet another dune, his heart whispered, "Beware of the place where you are brought to tears. That's where I am, and that's where your treasure is." The boy climbed the dune slowly. A full moon rose against the starry sky. It had been a month since he had set forth from the oasis. The moonlight cast shadows through the dunes, creating the appearance of a rolling sea. It reminded the boy of the day when that horse had reared in the desert, and he had come to know the alchemist. And the moon fell on the desert silence, and on a man's journey in search of treasure. When he reached the top of the dune, his heart leapt. There, illuminated by the light of the moon and the brightness of the desert, stood the solemn and majestic pyramids of Egypt. The boy fell to his knees and wept. He thanked God for making him believe in his personal legend, and for leading him to meet a king, a merchant, an Englishman, and an alchemist, and above all, for his having met a woman of the desert who had told him that love would never keep a man away from his personal legend. If he wanted to, he could now return to the oasis, go back to Fatima, and live his life as a simple shepherd. After all, the alchemist continued to live in the desert, even though he understood the language of the world and knew how to transform lead into gold. He didn't need to demonstrate his science and art to anyone. The boy told himself that on the way towards realizing his own personal legend, he had learned all the things he'd needed to know, and had experienced everything he might have dreamt of. But here he was at the point of finding his treasure, and he reminded himself that no project is completed until its objective had been achieved. The boy looked at the sand around him, and saw that where his tears had fallen, a scarab beetle was scuttling through the sand. During his time in the desert, he had learned that in Egypt, the scarab beetles are a symbol of God. Another omen. The boy began to dig in the dune, and as he did so, he thought of what the crystal merchant had once said.